All right, we're back. We are COMP1006 in the winter 2017 semester here at Georgian. Intro to Web Programming, week 11, part 3 of our broadcast. We're talking about PHP password encryption. We just finished watching the littlelynda.com video for 7 minutes. And again, which I recommend for lynda.com resources. They're kind of free across Ontario if you have access to a public library that supports them. So we want to go over to here into our, when we create our login and register, and this is where it actually happens. All the magic happens right here. When we first log in, remember I said here is username is equal to username, and then I want to check for unique username. We haven't done that. We have to do that too. But inside of our thing where we actually create our passwords, right? I get my password is equal to this post password, right? And that means I get my clear text password in. That's actually my clear text password. I need to create another object here. So instead of password being passed in here, right, I need to encrypt it by using password hash, right? So I'm going to say encrypted password, or we'll call it hash password. How about that? Hashed password is equal to password underscore hash, and we'll pass in the password that we put in as clear text password, and then decrypt, right? So password decrypt. Now it says here, it says password decrypt 1. There's other options here, right? But password decrypt is the first option. All right, so this one gives us our hash password, this part right here. So instead of putting in password over here, which goes into our inserting into our database, we're going to put in hash password. Okay. Make sense? That's the only change we've made so far. Hash password, password hash. Maybe I did. I don't know. Sure. It would stop me anyway. Because that's it right there. So that's the built-in method, right? That we're going to use. Hash password we get. Now this is on the registration side. Now on the login side, right? On the login side. And by the way, we're not automatically logging in. We'll do that another day. Maybe we'll do that in the other room. In my login side, right, I need to do the same thing. So here's my password. I'm select my users and blah, blah, blah. And what I want to do is down in the bottom, right, I want to compare my password and username with the stuff that I've got. So let's take a look. So where would you say that I would do that? So here's where I'm getting my query, and I'm going to bind my password in here. So this is where my password comes back, right? So my password, I check to see where this, right? This is where I'm selecting an ID. When I return an ID of 1, it returns good, then I'm logged in, right? So inside here, I got to hash my password again. So there's 2 ways to do that. Rehash my password. Will it create the same hash? Maybe, maybe not. Based on my date, not a good idea, right? But what if I retrieve my password from the database, right? And I check to see that my password from the database, right, matches what I put in. So let's try this out. Okay, so an example of this would be, here's my password, and my hash password is password verify. Password verify gives me a positive or negative. Remember that? So if I go password underscore verify, right? Verify. We may have to change our algorithm a little bit here, right? So the hash is what we have to pass in, require parameter missing. So we want to pass in the password we have, right, with the hash password, right, which is the one that's coming from the database. That's not what we're doing here, right? We're not doing that. We're checking to see if we're selecting the user where the ID is matching the password, right? But the password that's on the database is encrypted, right? So how can we do that? You see what I'm saying? We need to retrieve the password from the database, check it against the user, right? So we're not actually using the password to do this now. We're username and password. We're just going to retrieve the username based on the username alone and then hash the password, right? Based on this password that we get back, right? Because that ID that we select, we get a user based on that ID, a user object, right? And then we can check when we get that user, so the query, right? Select ID from users, right? The ID from users where it happens, where my username is equal to username. That's not what I want. I want my password from users where my username is equal to username. Isn't that what I want? I want to get my password back. That's all I'm retrieving, not my ID. Who cares about my ID? I'm not using it for anything else here, right? I'm not passing my user ID in any way, right? Am I? No, right? So that's all I want to do. So we may need to change this piece here alone. And then we do our password verify down here somewhere where these two things match. And if it's true, then we do that kind of count. Okay, now that's one way. What if, just for kicks, instead of doing this, we rehashed our password? Will we get the same result? Maybe today we would. Let's see. So if I say password hash, right? So they say, but let's not, you know, like again, we don't know what the actual algorithm is going to be. My password, right, is what I'm hashing, and then we're going to type bcrypt, right? Password bcrypt is what we're going to use, right? That's the same exact method that we're using, same stuff, same password, right? And what we want to do is we want to create that hash password again. So hashed underscore password, right? And that's equal to this password hash blah blah blah, right? And then instead of down here being that statement where we compare, we install that hashed password in there instead. Hash password, hashed password. There we go. That's what we did earlier, right? We're just doing the same thing. We're just rehashing it. Okay, now let's test it. So, and then we'll stop recording because we're almost at the end. All right, so let's register a new user. Obviously, we can't do a user the way it is. Oh, and by the way, one more thing to check before we go there is, does our database respect that length, right? Because if it doesn't, right, that would be very bad. That means we can try and do something and then it wouldn't work, right? So inside of our games DB, we have a users table. In the users table, we want to look at the structure. We want to see how big the passwords can be. And our password can be 50 characters. Maybe. Yeah, I don't think that'll work, right? So we have to change this password. We want to change this, right? So we want to change it, and I recommend something like 100, or even 128, or 256. Why would that be? Because maybe tomorrow our password algorithm is going to change. Not now, but maybe tomorrow, right? And to really preserve this process, right? We want to kind of come up with this, right? This idea that our password can be very big. Now we know it definitely supports, right? Let's go to the register page and try this out. So we're going to make a new username. We'll call him, I don't know, Peter Parker. Let's see if that exists. Peter Parker, right? Password 123456, and our display name is Peter Parker. Huh? Spider-Man, yeah, right? Okay, could make Spider-Man. All right. Spider-Man, right? And then submit, right? So now we're logged in, right? And we have to log in to get in there. Now this is where we check, right? So we're going to put in our username, Peter Parker, right? And our password is 123456. If I log in, then invalid username password, right? See, I'm trying to hash twice, and the hash that I'm using, because of different date and time, not working. That's why I recommend to you, we have to change our algorithm, right? And no matter what you do, my friends, right? Because I'm rehashing. By the way, let's take a look at what we set up in the database. So if I go to users, right, and you can see that I've got Spider-Man in here. Did I even put Peter Parker in here before? I probably did. Right? Now this is our pass. Look at our hash, right? And to compare this, we can always compare with what we're getting from the database. But this is the hash that we get, and it's 60 characters, not 64 for some reason. I don't know why, right? All right, so how do we fix it? Let's go back to this, right? So this won't work, but we want to retrieve a ID. Instead of an ID, we want to select a password from users, right? A password from users. So when I select an ID, it returns an ID, right? And now I can compare. I can do some kind of comparison where my statement row count is equal to 1. That's going to say how many rows does it return? And by the way, where is my ID stored? This part first, before we do anything else. When I return this stuff, where is my ID stored? This one, this part ID right here. Does anyone remember where it's stored? Well, it's in my statement, right? So in my statement itself, statement row count, right? But what else can I get from my statement, right? We want to execute everything. When we retrieve everything, we fetch everything from the database. Am I actually fetching anything here? I'm just executing, right? In order for me to fetch something, I need to use either fetch or fetch all, right? Now, a good example of that is if we go to our games list, right? Here's our games list. And the games list itself is going to use the games.php controller, right? So let's go back there. So here's our under controllers. Here's games PHP. We're running out of time, which I knew was going to happen. And if you look at this, what's happening is we're going to read games where we select star from thing. Our query, right, itself is the selection statement, right? Then we have our games, which does this other piece, fetch all, right? We want to do the same thing. Instead of games is equal to fetch all, we want to have this password, hash password, is equal to one that comes from the database. So if I go back to our login.php, right, we want to execute, but we want to get the password right from there, right, not the ID. So we're going to say something like this, where select password, right, from users, right, where the username is equal to the username. That's what I want. So I want to get rid of this. I'm just going to redo this thing altogether. That's all I want. So password where the user is equal to the username. I'm checking the username itself, right? Cool. I don't need to do this anymore. So we can comment this out, right? Because that's not what's happening with a hash password. The hash password that we're getting back, and we're not going to do that here, right? For a second, we're just going to comment this out really quickly. What we want to do, instead of this thing, just like we did with the list.php, or sorry, my games.php, where is it? Here it is. Just like we did down here, right? We want to do this. Where's the list? Where my games is equal to statement fetch, right? Where I want to fetch one object that matches, right? Now, what if, and this is the trouble, what if it doesn't match anything? What if I don't get a match? Am I going to get an error? Right? And that's a problem too, right? So should I use fetch or fetch all? Right? Okay. So let's try this out. So if I go back to that for a second before you guys take off, I go back to login. I want to create, and again, this is, by the way, just from an order perspective when you see this thing, right? In games, we did our execute, and then we did this, and then we close the cursor, right? Now we're going to do the close the cursor somewhere else, right? Because we don't have to do it here. Close cursor happens down here. What we want to do is we want to do the execute, and then we want to say something like this, hash password is equal to statement, and then fetch. Because we're fetching the information from our database, right? So we're just getting that hash password. That's all we're doing. The password is what we're getting back. Okay, now this part here, this password hash, we're not going to use. We're going to use password verify, right? And this is where it would be different, right? We're going to say if password verify is true, right? That's what we're going to put in here. We're going to say if password verify. We're going to pass in our password with our hash password, right? If that's true, then do this and we're good to go. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, let's try this out and see if it works. We're going to go back over here and refresh the page. No, we're going to go to home and go back to login, and we're going to log in with Peter Parker. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if we did everything correctly, which may have not. Okay. Now it says, warning, password verify expects parameter 2 to be a string array, given or an array given in C, users, Tom, desktop, blah, 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 PHP on line 19. So what's the problem? Password verify expects parameter 2 to be a string. Right? Am I getting a string back? Fetch is only getting one object, right?
Yeah, but it's an object of whole row. So even if it's an array of size 1.
Yeah. What was that?
It's a single dimensional array.
Single dimensional array, right?
Yeah.
So what do I need?
You need to grab it.
Well, we can print it out, right? We can echo what it does, right? This is the default, right? So if I go to when I execute and do this fetch, before I do this, I'm going to fail again, but I want to see what it says. When I echo my hash password, see what I get, right? That's easy to do. So I'm going to kind of go in here and we're going to log in with this stuff and let's see what happens. So let's go into Peter Parker. Let's go actually refresh. Log in, refresh, and we're going to Peter Parker, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and log in. And where's my hash? Where is it? Yeah, right here, right? So that's an array of stuff. So I want to get my my hash item that's 0, right? So my first item in the array. Sorry guys, I know I'm over time. I apologize. Wait. You're right. But I'm going to log in with Peter Parker. And let's try again. And it says, okay, warning. Bunch of warnings, right? Array to string conversion, right? Can't do that, right? So what's the associative array I need to use? Password. Right? So I go back here. And then hash password is not hash password, it's just password, right? So that's what it returns, right? Oh, it logged me in actually. See that? It worked. Let's try it again. So I'm going to go to Peter Parker, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, log in. Okay, cool. Can I modify header information? Headers already sent by output started at blah, blah. That's a different error, right? Array to string conversion. That doesn't work.
Is it because you're trying to print out the array? You're trying to echo it out.
All right. But if okay, let me just get rid of it. For example, hold on a second. So if I go back, like you said, right, and I get rid of the echo here. Nope. And I knew we were going to go over. Let's just move to the other room after this, guys. After this attempt, we'll go into the other room and then I'll continue. I know. We're good, right? And then we log out. We can see our games list because we're logged in, and we can see our log out. Guys, thank you so much. We'll continue in the other room.